Hi, I'm John Hornick. Welcome to lesson 79 of Chef's Apprentice, learning to cook like a pro, one small plate at a time. This lesson is wild mushroom cigar with truffle butter. In this dish, you will learn to prepare food for deep frying and then deep fry it. The traditional preparation for deep frying, at least in Western cooking, is to dredge the food in flour, which is then dipped in an egg wash, which is simply eggs lightly beaten with a pinch of salt, then rolled in breadcrumbs. You will then briefly deep fry the wild mushroom cigars until they are lightly golden. Deep frying does not require special equipment. All you need is at least 32 ounces of canola oil and a heavy bottom saucepan deep enough to hold the oil without it being close to the rim, and a candy or deep fry thermometer. The typical deep frying temperature is 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which can cause severe burns, so be very careful. Also be careful not to overheat the oil. It will first start to smoke, then catch fire. When the food is dropped into the hot oil, the temperature of the oil will drop. Deep frying in oil that is not hot enough will yield soggy, greasy results, so it's best to deep fry in small batches. You also finish the sauce for this dish a la minute, which means to cook or finish a dish or component just before serving it. The challenge of this dish is to become comfortable working with hot oil and to deep fry the cigars so they are done to golden perfection and not soggy from the oil. Techniques today are beating eggs, mincing, seasoning and sauteing mushrooms, deglazing and reducing, dredging and using an egg wash, sweating, deep frying, and keeping warm, finishing a sauce a la minute, plating, and garnishing. So let's start cooking. All right, let's talk about the mise en place for lesson 79, the wild mushroom cigars. We'll need about 10 ounces of assorted wild mushrooms. I have here shiitake, lion's mane, pioppino, trumpet mushrooms, and oyster mushrooms, okay? But you can have any kind of assorted wild mushrooms. If you can't find wild mushrooms, just use regular mushrooms. Also, we'll need to have some olive oil and kosher salt. Also, peppermill for freshly ground black pepper. Then we're going to need some mascarpone cheese, or mascarpone, depends on how you say it. We'll need about a half a cup of that. I'm just going to eyeball how much we use. We'll also need to have one to two cups of flour to dredge the cigars. I'm going to start with just about a cup, but I'm just going to eyeball it. We'll also need to have 1 to 2 eggs, lightly beaten with a little bit of salt. I'm going to start with 1 egg, because if that's all we need, then we won't waste the other egg. We'll need to have some panko breadcrumbs. Again, 1 to 2 cups. I'm going to start with about 1 cup, but I'm just going to eyeball it. Then we'll need to have at least 32 ounces of canola oil or another high smoke point oil. However, some of the other high smoke point oils are more expensive than canola. So I use canola for deep frying because I'm using a lot of it. And also, this is oil that I've used before, but it's oil I've only used for deep frying. So I have 32 ounces in this container, and I have some more in this container. The more oil you have, the better off you are, because it will maintain the temperature better. It'll be easier to keep the temperature where you want it, which is 350. And then when you add the food to it, it will be easier to keep the temperature at 350 the more oil you have. But you have to have a pan that's big enough to hold it without it sloshing around, without it being too close to the edge, okay? So it's safe. Then we need to have about 2 tablespoons of minced shallots, and about 1 tablespoon of minced garlic. Then we'll need about a half a cup of white wine. Now, as I've said in other lessons, you can use white wine, you can use dry vermouth. My wife recently suggested using these little bottles of wine. This is a Sutter Home brand, but there are others out there. And this is, just about the amount that we'll want, maybe a little bit more. Okay, so then they have screw tops. You take the top off, pour the amount of wine that you want, which we're just going to eyeball, and then put the top back on, put it back in the fridge for the next time. Then we'll need to have about 1 cup of chicken stock. Remember, we make our own stock. Stock chart on my website, www.chefsapprentice.com. And there's also a bonus video on making duck stock, which is the same as chicken stock, except you use chicken instead of duck. And then we'll need to have about 2 tablespoons of truffle butter, either white truffle butter or black truffle butter. Okay, that's all of the ingredients. We'll break and come back, and I'll show you the equipment for lesson 79. Okay, for equipment, we'll need to have a cutting board and chef's knife. We'll also need to have a slicer to slice the cigars at the end. Need to have a tongs to remove the cigars from the deep fryer. A spoon to drizzle the sauce at the end. You need to have something to measure the temperature in the deep fryer. Now you can use a candy thermometer or a deep fry thermometer like this, or you can use an instant read thermometer like this. Or if you have a barbecue thermometer, you could even put the probe that you use to put into the barbecue itself. You could use that in the oil. We'll also need to have a bowl to whisk the eggs. I've already whisked the eggs and they're in this bowl, but I'm going to put that back in the fridge. And then we'll need to have a large saute pan to saute the mushrooms. We want it to be large so that they're not crowded, so that they brown and don't steam, okay? And a wooden spoon to stir them around. Then we'll also want to have some paper towels to blot the mushrooms. I don't usually use paper towels, but this is the best thing for this particular application. If you try to use a kitchen towel, they stick to it more. I think it's better to use paper towels. Then we'll need to have a bowl to mix the cheese and the mushrooms. And we'll need to have a sizzle plate or a sheet pan to receive the cigars after we make them. And then we'll need to have 3 dredging plates. Now you can use either 3 sizzle plates, or you can just use 3 kitchen plates. We're going to be using one for the flour dredge, one for the egg, and one for the panko breadcrumbs. And then we're going to need to have a saucepan and wooden spoon to make the sauce. And then we're going to need to have something to do the deep frying in. Now this is a deep frying pan. It's carbon steel. It's good for distributing the heat. But you can use any heavy bottomed saucepan as long as it's big enough to hold your oil so that the oil's not up near the rim. If it's too close to the rim, it can slosh around more, it's more dangerous. So make sure you have a pan where the oil is down in the pan, at least a couple of inches. It's a lot safer that way. But I'm going to use this deep fry pan. It also has a removable basket for removing things after you have cooked them. Then finally, we will need to have a cooling rack and a towel to go under it. You could use paper towels under the cooling rack. I don't use many paper towels. Try to keep my carbon footprint smaller. So I just use kitchen towels and then I wash them. Okay, that's all. And we'll also need plates, of course, for plating at the end, but I haven't picked those yet. So that's all the equipment we need. We'll break and come back and start cooking. All right, the first thing we're going to do is just chop these mushrooms so that they're in smaller pieces. If we try to saute them now, it's just going to be a lot harder to do because they're just large pieces. They're also all different mushrooms. They're all different sizes. So I'm just going to chop them into more manageable size pieces. About a half an inch to an inch in diameter, and these pieces of the trumpet mushroom, you can see how big they are. So what I've done is I've just sliced them up into smaller pieces. Now we're going to put them into the saute pan. We're going to put about 2 tablespoons of olive oil into the pan, bring it up to medium heat, and after that oil just starts to have whiffs of smoke, we're going to saute the mushrooms. All right, so we're just starting to get whiffs of smoke. We're going to add the mushrooms to the pan, and then we want to add some salt and pepper. Now remember, we've done mushrooms before. What's going to happen is that the mushrooms are going to absorb that oil, and they're going to start to look dry. But then as they cook, they'll start to release that oil again, and they'll start to glisten a bit. What we want to do is cook these until they start to chirp when they're pressed into the pan. Okay, we have some nice brown on these mushrooms, and if we press it into the pan, hear that? You can hear the chirping. Okay, now what we want to do is deglaze with some white wine. Now, I have one of these little bottles that has a little bit left in it. That's less than I wanted to use, so I'm just going to add, probably added about a half a cup altogether. Now we're going to let that reduce until it's almost dry. Now this pan is almost dry, and normally what we say is just wet, okay? Now what I want to do is I want to get this a little bit drier than just wet. So we don't want it so dry that it starts to burn, but I really want to cook off pretty much all of the liquid so that the mushrooms are still moist, but the liquid has cooked out of the pan. So you can see there's really almost just a thin layer of the liquid left in the pan. I just want to cook that off. Now what I'm going to do after cooking that off is I'm going to put these onto the cutting board so we can pat them dry and mince them. All right, the next thing on our list is to pat the mushrooms dry and then to mince them. So I'm just going to take these paper towels here and spread them out a little bit on the board. Pat them. All right, now I want to mince them. So I want them to be pretty fine. Okay, that looks pretty good, pretty fine. Okay, now what we're going to do is put these into the mixing bowl that we'll use to mix mushrooms with the cheese. All right, now we want to mix the cheese with the mushrooms, and this is 8 ounces of cheese. And that's a cup, so we want to use about a half a cup. But I don't want to do this blindly, okay? I want to have a good proportion, and a good proportion of the cheese to the mushrooms. So it's better to start off with less, and you can always add more cheese, okay? So what we want to do is mix this up. Now I can already see that I have more mushroom than I have cheese in there, so I'm going to add some more cheese. What we want to do is wind up with a good like mushroom paste, okay? Because remember, we're going to be chilling this, and then we're going to be trying to form this mixture into a cigar shape, right? If it's too gooey, it's going to be hard to do, and if it doesn't have enough cheese, they're not going to hold together very well. So we need to have a good paste that will form into a cigar shape. Okay, now you can see we have a nice paste. I think that after this is chilled, we'll be able to form that into cigars nicely. I want to do a little taste. First, I want to clean the fork. All right, now would be the time to adjust the seasoning. I'm going to add a little bit more salt and pepper. All right, let's taste it again. Okay, that's good. Now, what I want to do is I want to chill this covered until it's firm. How long is that going to take? Well, it depends on how warm the cheese got while you were mixing this up. So, I'm going to see if it's ready to go in about 30 minutes, but it could take as long as 45 to 60 minutes to get it nice and firm for the next step. So cover it, chill it 30 to 60 minutes. And I'm not going to come back and show you that. I'm just going to bring it out when it's chilled and firm. You're just going to have to watch your own and see when it's ready, when it's chilled and firm. All right, now the next thing we're going to do is we're forming the cigars, and then we're going to dredge them in flour. And so I'm just taking, you know, a mound of this. I want to make these about 4 inches long and about 3/4 of an inch around. So they're kind of like short cigars, right? Cigar shaped. And then I want to dredge it in the flour. and put it on the receiving plate. All right, we're going to do that with each one of these. I mean, with all, we're going to do that with all of the mushroom mixture, and hopefully we will have about 6 of these when we're finished. So I don't have room on the sizzle plate for that 6th one, so I'm just going to leave it there. Next step is going to be to chill them. I'll put it on the side or something. And I'm going to chill these for about half hour to an hour. Again, we want them to be firm. And this is also going to get a little harder as you go with this mixture, because as it warms to room temperature, it's going to be a little bit harder to work with. So you want to start off with it being really firm. Okay, we have our oil here in the deep frying pan, and we're going to start bringing it up to 350 degrees. I'm going to start with a heat that's a little bit below medium. I have this deep fry thermometer in here, which is brand new. I've never used it before, so we're going to keep an eye on that. I don't want to start with too high a temperature because the oil might heat up too fast, and once it gets to 350, it might shoot right past that and get way too hot. So I want to bring the heat up kind of gradually. Now what else? Now what we're going to do in this saucepan right here is add some olive oil, and it's about a tablespoon, maybe a little bit more. And then we're going to add the shallots, and we're going to sweat those. All right, so the shallots are translucent. We're going to add the garlic and just stir that up a bit. Cook it for 30 seconds or so. Okay, now we're going to deglaze with white wine. Now I've got a little bit more left in this bottle, but it's not as much as I'd like to have, so I'm going to add that. And then I'm going to just add some dry vermouth, roughly 1/3 to 1/2 cup. Now what we want to do is increase the heat on this and reduce it until it is almost dry. All right, so the temperature on our deep fry thermometer is a little bit above 300, so I'm going to reduce the heat a little bit. When it starts to get closer to 350, I'm going to jiggle with the heat a little bit so I can try to keep it at 350. Now coming back to our saucepan, this is almost dry, so we're going to add the chicken stock. Now there was a cup of chicken stock. What I want to reduce this to is about 1/3 of a cup, okay? So we are going to leave it on the higher temperature. It's going to start to boil. We're going to keep an eye on it and reduce it to about 1/3 of a cup total. Meanwhile, keep an eye on your oil. All right, now while the sauce is reducing, we're going to do the egg wash and the panko breadcrumbs on the cigars, and I'm also keeping an eye on the oil. I've been jiggling with the temperature to try to get it to right around 350 and to keep it there. So what we're going to do now is take each one of these cigars and put it in the egg wash. And I've just, like I said at the beginning, I just used 1 egg. Right now, if I need more eggs, I'll get another egg. And then we want to run it through the breadcrumbs and then onto a clean sizzle plate. So we're going to do that with each one of the cigars. There we go. Now you might have noticed that one of the cigars broke. I tried to piece it back together. That's why it's always good to make a couple extras. Luckily, I'm only making for 4 tonight, so the fact that I broke one is probably okay. Also, I'm going to deep fry it anyway. If it's in 2 pieces, then I'll just place them back together on the plate because they're going to be sliced anyway and arranged artistically on the plate for service. Okay, our sauce is reduced to about 1/3 of a cup. Now at this stage, some chefs would strain it. They'd strain out the garlic and the shallots. I do sometimes. I strain it out sometimes I leave it in. Today I'm going to leave it in. What we're going to do is just keep this warm until we're close to getting ready to serve. Now let's check our temperature on our deep fryer. We're a little bit above 350, so I'm going to reduce the heat. Wait till it comes back down to 350. Now, since we're going to be waiting a little bit to let the temperature come down, I am going to put the cigars back into the refrigerator so they stay firm until we're ready to deep fry them. All right, now our temperature is just about 350. I'm going to increase the temperature a little bit. Why am I doing that? Because once I put the food in, it's going to drop the temperature of the oil, and I want to keep the oil temperature at about 350. So by turning up the heat a little bit, I'm hoping to compensate for putting in the cold food. And I want to deep fry these 2 at a time until they are golden. I'm just going to have to check them, see how it goes. You know, probably about a minute, maybe 2 minutes. Now after we take them out of the oil, we're going to put them over here on the side onto the cooling rack, which has a towel underneath to catch any dripping oil. Looking at our temperature, it's holding right around 350. Now these are looking beautifully golden. I'm going to let them go for just a little bit longer, and I've decided to use the slotted spoon instead of the tongs because I want to be careful not to break them in half as I'm taking them out of the oil. Okay, beautiful, beautiful. Onto the cooling rack. Check our temperature to see if we're still at 350, and we are. Adding the next 2 to the oil. Checking our temperature again, it's right at 350. Dropping 1 in. This one I'm afraid may break, so I'm going to put it in carefully on the spoon. Same thing with this one. Now the first 4 have been draining on the rack for a while now. I'm going to put them onto a sizzle plate and put them in a warm place. Keep them warm until we have all 6 cooked. Okay, the last 2. Beautiful, did not break apart, and I would have bet that at least one of them was going to. All right, now turn your heat off Turn your oil off and don't touch it. Leave it alone until it has come down to room temperature. You can reuse this oil. Wait till it's cold, okay? Wait till it's room temperature, then strain it back into the bottles, put it in the refrigerator, and you can use it again. All right, now we're gonna swirl the truffle butter into the sauce, and we're gonna just swirl it in until it's melted. We're doing this a la minute, so this is, you do this just before you're gonna serve. And this is also called mounting with butter, okay? So you just wanna swirl that in there until it's melted. You can use a spoon, or you can use, well, the handle's a little hot, so I had it in a warm spot. You can just swirl it around like this until it is all melted. And then if there's any time between the time that you do this and the time you plate up, just put it back into a warm spot. If the butter starts to separate from the sauce a little bit before you plate it, then just stir it up. Okay, that's pretty much melted. It's going to melt a little bit more with residual cooking, so we're taking this off the burner, putting it into a warm spot, get ready to plate up. Okay, time to plate up. We're going to take one of the cigars, cut it diagonally, and then place the pieces artistically on the plate. Take your sauce, drizzle a little bit over the top, and there we have it. That is lesson 79, the wild mushroom cigar with truffle butter. You can see photos of the final dish at my Instagram, which is @ChefsApprentice Cook Like a Pro. Next up is truffled corn custard with Grand Marnier glazed foie gras. Foie gras, a Cook Like a Pro ingredient. Please remember to subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching.